nice gift. So let's just make sure my clicker's working. There we go. So as I said to you, we're going to share our superpower with you today, giving you a look under the hood of what we do and how we approach things, and giving you an opportunity to unleash your digital performance. So we're starting with the view that vanity metrics are dangerous. And I often, when I talk about this, people start nodding because they're like, yes, this is right. They are dangerous. When you get hung up on chasing the big numbers, the traffic, and chasing these numbers that actually, the numbers alone don't really help you know what's working or not working. They're just this big number. When actually, like for me personally, I'd rather have less traffic and it be the right traffic than just a big glory number. So vanity metrics can be so dangerous. We do have the big money metrics that are an absolute given in a strategy. So for e-com businesses, that's going to be how much money is being turned over from the website and the return on investment for certain channels. So your big money metrics. And if you're a B2B business, it might be more around your leads or the amount of traffic coming through the site. So those are important metrics and they're never going to go away. But we're not going to talk about them too much today. We're going to be delving deeper. And I always use this phrase that if it's easy to measure, it probably isn't that valuable, other than your money metrics, because you do need to know them. But when we're thinking about other metrics, if it's super easy and if it's just straight out of GA4 or whichever platform you're using, then it probably isn't giving you that much value to your strategy because it's not really tailored. It's the same stat that anyone can read about their website and their performance. So sanity for me can be found in a reporting strategy that's built for your business. So what that does mean is, as much as I'm going to give you lots of ideas today, I'm not going to give you all the answers because that would mean, I don't know, we've got about 40 of you on the call that I'd need to give 40 different answers because there isn't a one-size-fits-all strategy for tracking. It can't be the same. You can't just do what somebody else does because it needs to be built for your business. And only you know what metrics really turn the dial for your business. Only you really understand what works and understand who you're trying to attract, etc. So you will go away from today with homework. So I apologize for that. I won't be marking your homework though, so it'll be up to you whether you do it or not. But it's going to be down to you how you take this forward and use what we talk about today. So this might be a shock for you, but to plan your tracking well, you shouldn't start with the tracking tools. So we can stay away as far away. And actually today, we're not really going to talk about the detail of any of the tracking tools, which for anyone that's just gone through their GA4 migration in a mad last minute panic, you'll probably really be pleased to hear about that and not having to worry about looking in GA4 at the moment. But yeah, we shouldn't start with the tools because the tools kind of, we get too into the detail. We want to start much further away from that. So we're going to start by talking about your audience. So the people that you're actually trying to attract, which could be the type of customers you're already attracting. It could be a new audience you want to go after. It could be multiple audiences that your business appeals to. Again, this will be different for everybody, but that is where we should start from a focus point of view. Now, customer experience is everything. And I love this slide and this picture because it's just a great example of how we can design everything we like and make it as pretty and perfect as we think, but customers will hack it. They'll find their own way. And really what we actually want to know before we design and build something is what's the hack? Because the hack is what we want to be tracking. It's that we want to be understanding. So yeah, it's the same with your website strategy, your digital marketing strategy, all of that. We want to be outside in. We want to be understanding from our customers' expectations, experience, their needs, everything that they want first, rather than being inside out, where we just, as you see in this design, this was an inside out design. It was designed as someone thought it should be used, but not how the masses have then chosen to use it. So before you even begin to plan your tracking, there's a number of things that you're going to need to know. So you need to know who your audience are, who they are. And this isn't just demographically, this isn't that kind of detail. It's not, well, we appeal to women between 30 and 40. That's not going to get you very far. We want to know a lot more about them. We want to know what motivates them, what drives them. We want to know where they go, where they spend time online. And I'm focusing this more from an online perspective. If you're a business that straddles bricks and mortar business as well, then you have more of a challenge to think about, and be more than happy to chat to you about that another time. But focusing more online, we need to be thinking about where they go, where they spend their time, what social platforms, for example, what news sites they visit, what forums are they part of, are they playing games online, what are they doing online, where are they spending their time? And then we also want to start to understand how they move through your sales funnel. So how they go from thinking about what it is that they need through to actually being ready to buy something. Now, we've all seen the traditional funnel before. I won't spend too long dwelling on this, but we know they start by kind of identifying a need, and that's where they start to become aware. They may not even know your solution exists at this point. They go on to a stage then where they're researching, they're understanding, considering, evaluating, trying to work out what the right thing to do is. Then they're ready to buy or inquire, whatever that looks like for your business, that kind of final stage where they're actually transacting with you. And then we have this great opportunity for retention and advocacy at the end. So this ability to nurture them and to get them to come back and buy again, but also to drive their friends, their family, whoever, tell the world that they should also be buying from you as well. Now, for every business, this journey will be different and will look different and will take different varying amounts of time. So for example, if you're just selling, I don't know, £2 widgets that people need when their washing machine breaks and they Google, how do I fix this? Your journey is going to be much shorter. They're in a distressed state. They're going to be buying almost the same day. And you therefore have a longer opportunity, I guess, in the future piece to make them advocates if you sell other products, etc. But then there'll be other businesses, such as people selling sofas or chairs or furniture for the home, or cars or anything like that, where it's a much more considered purchase. And you could be looking at something between a 4-week all the way up to a 12-month process sometimes, where I don't know about you guys, but I know whenever my husband's ready to change his car, that's like a 12-month process of watching him search and research and know everything about every car, for example. So you've got these different lengths of funnel. And what we're trying to do when we're starting to understand our audience better is we're starting to try and make sense of the messy middle, as Google calls it. And I love this example by Google, and I love this language, because as much as it looks pretty and nice to have a little funnel and talk about it through these perfect stages, it's not like that in the real world. Humans are weird. We're strange creatures. We don't do what we think we're going to do. We don't do what we're expected to do. We kind of jump around, and it is much more of this messy blur of activity. And the more you can make it a bit less blurred, the more that you can understand what's going on, the better, because that's going to help us. So then this is just an example of a digital funnel. So what we're talking about here is where we start to, as we understand those different stages, start to think what channel might play best and what channel is going to give us the best opportunity. So for example, on this one, we've included SEO and paid at the start, but we said kind of tactical paid, because when someone's really early in the journey, it can be quite risky to spend too much money on paid, because we don't really know their intent. We don't really know if they definitely are going to get to a stage where they want to buy, or if they're just researching something or looking for information. Whereas SEO, actually, if we can be there for these, because these tend to be big ticket keywords, they tend to be things with huge amounts of search volume. Actually, if we could be there organically, then long term, that's going to cost us less money in most cases, depending on how competitive your market is. And again, this is why this is all an example, because the digital funnel for your business will be specific to how we think people search, where they're going, where they're spending time, and where your opportunity sits. But then as they go through the funnel and they start to show more intent, then we should feel more willing to spend some money on paid media, for example, and actually trying to drive them back to the site. But all along this journey, what we're trying to do as we start to map our channels is look at how our channels can play really nicely together, and how they can actually act in a way of helping each other. I often use this analogy of thinking about the user as a baton in a relay race. And it's almost like, right, what channel is going to pick them up as early as possible? And how do we then keep them in our world with our content, helping them, supporting them through their journey? And how can we keep passing that baton between channels to keep them moving through in a way that supports them? Because we want to be customer first. So then when they're ready to convert, we might need to be ready to jump on any channel, but it's trying to work out where they're going to be at that point and what type of messaging they're looking for. And then the ongoing retention and nurturing of them and turning them into advocates. The channels that are relevant here is going to be really dependent on your business and what feels right. If you're selling something that they're not likely to buy again for 7 or 8 years, then we need to think differently about how we communicate to if you're selling something that actually they might buy as part of their weekly shop, and we've got lots of opportunities to get them to keep coming back. So that's just an example. And then finally, I've got a quick example of then layering in some of the behavioural science of thinking about how do we want them to feel, what do we want them to do, and how do we want to leave them, like leave their minds and support them in what they're trying to do. So if we think of an example whereby maybe it is that 3 to 6 month process where from when they start looking for something before they actually buy, in that instance, it's going to be so important in the early stages to build memories with the customer, to make our brand memorable, to make sure that they want to come back to us. And to build memories, we need to disrupt. We need to create a moment in their mind. We want to make them feel something to make something actually memorable. Then as we go on to build the relationship, we're going to need to be demonstrating our expertise, our authority on the subject. We're going to want to gain trust with them. So we're building a relationship. And if we can be there for them at every turn, every time they turn to Google and ask a question or they go to their social channels, there we are helping them, being supportive, not just driving a sale. We're going to be much more likely to get them down to the next stage where they're ready to buy. And at this stage, we need to make them feel like they're making the right decision. There's a whole piece of work around understanding post-purchase regret. And actually, anyone that's on the call today that's in an e-commerce, and especially in kind of a fashion market, knows how important it is to try and get customers to keep hold of what they buy, and actually how costly it is for businesses when they're returning items. So actually part of making people want to keep the items is really thinking about that whole process and making them feel like they've made the right decision. We doubt ourselves all the time, especially when we're spending money in a time where money is tight, etc., for so many. So we want to make it really easy for them to convert. We want to make it feel like they're making the right decision. And we need to remember for the e-com sites that are here today, that process doesn't end at the point that they've put their payment details through. We need to continue. So actually the way an item is delivered, the packaging, the experience of unboxing it, the emails that come through ahead of the delivery, and the excitement that they can build, they're all things that will play into making someone want to keep the item versus not. And then finally, we want to continue to do all the above. So once they're our customer and we've got this opportunity to retain them and turn them into advocates, we want to stay in touch. We want to continue to grab their attention and create memories with them so that they remember our brand when they get an opportunity to recommend us. So we want to continue to evoke emotions with them and just be supportive and helpful, because that's going to bring us more sales long term. So that's kind of just 3 different ways that we look at the funnel. So I'm going to tell a quick story that will set us up for the rest of the webinar. And this was a client that came to us. So they've been doing SEO for a number of years, and they'd hit a situation whereby internally they'd lost kind of support for SEO and spending money on SEO because no one could see that it was driving return on investment anymore. So they'd been given one last chance because they thought it was the agency that was wrong that they were with, which we'll find out in a minute. Actually, it probably wasn't, which is a real shame for that agency. But so they left their previous agency. They moved over to us, and we took them through this process of really understanding where SEO was going to sit in the customer journey, and therefore what SEO's job was. And suddenly we'd reframed things for them, because they'd been just judging whether SEO was bringing them sales. But what they hadn't really realized, that they hadn't set SEO up to bring them sales, not as a first touch point, yes, as a part of the customer journey, but they were actually unfairly measuring the success of their SEO. And by doing that, they thought it was unsuccessful. And internally, they couldn't really, like, the marketing team wanted to keep doing it because they kind of believed in it, but they actually didn't have the right language around it to get the buy-in across the business. So by coming to us, actually, what we realized is the previous agency had been doing a fine job from an SEO perspective, and we picked up and carried on doing that fine job. But the reason we were then able to retain them and make them a happy customer was because we translated the narrative into actually what was SEO's job to do, and therefore how do we properly measure it. And at that point, it suddenly was being successful, even though really we hadn't. I mean, we did ongoing turn the dial. You'd always expect SEO to be increasing, but actually it wasn't really that the previous company had been doing a bad job. It had just been a bad situation of understanding it. So it just shows how sometimes those vanity metrics, or being too focused on money metrics, but not really knowing if that's relevant, can be super, super dangerous. And as marketers, as I'm sure everyone on the call is a marketer, we want to hold on to our budgets. We want to keep investing in the areas we know is important. So getting the right language and being able to speak about it in the right way internally, and setting ourselves up for success in that way, is absolutely critical. And that's really what we're going to go on to talk about. So how am I doing for time? I'm doing good. So how do you understand your audience and the sales funnel? So I've kind of talked about why I think this is important, but how do you actually do it? So you start with customer research. So you need to start by understanding who your customers are and talking to them. And the idea is you need to be able to uncover your audience's motivations. We need to know in general, it would be good to understand this, but in particular for buying your type of product, service, engaging with your business, we need to understand what motivates them to do so. We need to understand their fears and their concerns. Like, what is it that worries them? What is it? I don't know, in our example of us as an agency, we know that often we can be on the back foot because people haven't necessarily had a great agency experience. So they're worried, is it going to go wrong again? Are they going to be a bad agency? As you start to understand these things, that can be really powerful for thinking about the customer journey and the content and the messaging. We want to know what excites them, what gets them going, what gets them motivated and happy and wanting to engage with the brand. We want to know what stops them progressing. So what are the roadblocks that could pop up along the way, and why do they pop up, and how could we get over them? And we want to know what enables them to progress, what pushes them on, what drives. If your lead time can be anywhere between days, weeks, all the way up to months, how do we shorten it? What is it that might push them to progress quicker? And who or where do they go to for advice? Is it friends and family? Are they turning to social media groups? What are they doing? Where are they getting their advice from? And in particular, if you can relate that to specifically buying your type of product or service, then that's going to be really powerful. But in general, if we also understand who the influencers are for them, that can be really helpful. And who do they trust? And so on, all of these big questions where we start to really understand them. And that's actually how you bucket your users then, because you start to see similarities. So rather than having these buckets that are based around demographics, it's more based around motivations and what drives them to do what they're doing, and trying to find the similarities there. So we've got our persona groups. So how do you do this research? Because it sounds lovely, doesn't it? But how do you do it? So these are some of the different ways that we would use, and depending on the client and the opportunity and what it is that they've got ahead of them, what they already know about their audience, we would pick a mixture of these, or in some cases we might do a bit of everything. If it really is a kind of almost a start from scratch, or looking to enter a new market, for example, you might want to do a bit of everything. So I'll walk you through them. So audience surveys. So this will be in our case, writing behaviorally written surveys, because it's one thing I've learned as the journey we've gone on into understanding more about behavioral science. Obviously, I've employed people that know a lot more about this than I personally do. And it's made me realize how rubbish I can be at writing questions for surveys, and how amazing when you really understand how to craft a question, and when we're trying to elicit information from someone and trying to get the true answer. Because I think the thing with humans is, I could ask all of you, why did you have what you had for breakfast this morning? And the thing is, you don't really know. You're post-rationalizing, you'll give me an answer. But what we're trying to do when we're asking questions is to find out the real answer and trying to dig deep, because we don't want them to just tell us what they think we want to know. So these audience surveys, we would send them, if you've got a large email database and we want to know about current customers, we'd send them that way. We use paid surveys, so we've got partner agencies that we use for doing research. So we'd go and find specific types of audience groups, or we might do it more of a blanket approach if it was a wider approach, but trying to get information, or real user surveys. So sending people that are current customers, surveys that might be things that pop up in your software if you're a software business, but really trying to get people to give us information and feedback on the product as well. Then we've got social listening, so using tools like Meltwater to try and understand what's going on out there. What are people talking about? Sentiment analysis, looking at competitors, looking at trends in the market, looking at actually if we know some of the aspirational sites where we might want to start showing our content more, places that we know our audience go to for advice or are going to for understanding information, etc. If we can understand what they're talking about and the type of sentiment happening in those spaces as well, that can be really useful. We then do desk research as well. So we'll look at what research already exists out there, what it is that that audiences might be doing that has already been analysed, assessed and put into papers. We then look at client persona workshops, so running persona workshops with team members that are actively involved, talking to customers regularly. So I think we often forget how important our customer service team might be, people that might be answering live chats or talking on the phone to customers. They can have so much insight into our actual customers, but also our frontline salespeople, people that are meeting customers all the time. This just helps us when we're testing some assumptions. We tend to do this a bit further down in the process when we've already got some data, because we're trying to get quantitative, qualitative, and trying to test our assumptions throughout the process. CRM analysis, so looking at what data you already hold on customers, and if there's anything useful we can take from there. And then kind of one-on-one in-house interviews, so talking to people across the business, but again, that tend to be more in those marketing, sales, customer service type roles. And all of that falls into creating our digital personas and user journeys, which then ends up as part of our digital strategy. So partly alongside this, you can do them slightly in tandem, although you do need to make sure that there's certain things from the customer research that you might want to know first to direct this. But we need to start doing our in-depth channel research. So we need to start really understanding keyword research, for example, and understanding the volume of people searching or the size of audiences on certain social platforms. So, for example, yeah, it might be keywords and search trends that we're looking at. It might be audience insights and targeting, so trying to understand insights around your specific audience, the size of different buckets we might be able to create in Meta, for example. It might be also looking at current performance audits, so looking at what's working, what's not working, from an actual sales perspective as well, or inquiries, trying to understand which channels seem to be having the best impact with your audience. That doesn't mean that they are the best one. That might just be where you're putting your efforts at the moment. But as we layer that back in with what we're seeing from what the audience wants, we'll start to see if there's any patterns there. Looking at competitors, partners, retailers, whoever it is in your world that's going to give you some information to understand what their strategy might be looking like, how they're reaching their audience, what's working, what's not. When we come on at the end to just talk about selling in your strategy, understanding what your competitors are doing well and where maybe they seem to be capitalizing on a market that maybe you're missing, or they're covering off a whole section of content that maybe you're missing, can be really helpful for trying to steer direction on that, because we can start to show a bit of FOMO of like, we're missing out on this and our competitors are here. And then digital PR, social media trends, that type of thing. But as we start to gather all of this insight in, we can start to layer it all together. And we do this using a number of different tools. We don't get paid by any of these. I've just put some examples on screen so that people can start to see where they might want to start with this. But yeah, these are some of our favorite tools that we use, but this isn't the full suite probably, and it's also not necessarily all the best ones. Like, there will be other tools out there as well. It's finding the right tool set for you and for your business, and to find the data that you need to get. So ideally, you then have a behavioural strategist to help you. So we're super lucky. Kieran heads up our behavioural strategy here at Reflect. If you've been to a Brunch and Learn before, you've probably seen and met Kieran. But ideally, you then have Kieran, because the next bit's hard and you need someone bright like Kieran to help you. But if you don't, you can still do this. This is it is still possible, and it's a case of starting to map this data. So you're starting to knit this information together and see how it layers in together. So you've got this plethora of customer insight. We've started to learn so much about them. And we've got all this research from our channels, our retailers, our competitors. We really understand our market better than we did before. So you can now start to map this into this customer journey. And you do this on a per persona basis. So you don't try and do everyone all at once, because what we really want to start to understand is per persona, how does the journey vary? How do the channels vary? Where the customer's going, what influences them, what's important to them? How does that change? And you create it as a map. So like Miro is our best friend here. We love Miro. So we'll create a Miro board. And to begin with, it will feel really messy, but you'll be able to start to neaten it up, tidy it up. But we start to be able to map where our customers are spending their time and what it is that's driving them. So for each customer persona, you're going to end up with a map which helps you see what their thoughts are. So what they're thinking about at each stage, what their actions are, what they're trying to do, where they're going, all of the different touch points where they might be going. And I say all, you're never going to find all of them, but the key ones that you think are most important, that come up most often, that are the most reachable. And then you'll start to find more as you start to roll this out. The emotional journey they go on, what drives them, what stops them, all those kind of things. You might start to see some behavioural insights, so some things that are going on. So, for example, it might be spotting things like post-purchase regret being a real impact near the end of the journey. So starting to see opportunities that you might have to be able to drive the journey by understanding their behaviour. You'll see your channel opportunities. So you'll start to see which channels seem most important at each stage, where you've got your biggest buckets of data, for example, of people searching. And then the think, feel, do directives. I'll come back to that in a second. And then KPIs. We will talk about metrics. This is where you will start to be able to add in some KPIs, because you'll be able to start to think, well, I know my customer feels like this, and at this point in the journey, this is what they're trying to do. How can you turn that into a KPI? How can you measure whether that's been successful? Because now we're starting to understand at each stage of the journey what they want to do. We want to be helping them to do that. So we want to know, can we measure it? So this should help you to see the priority channels for your business, because you'll start to see, because we have to remember, we can't do everything at once. Like, unless you're sitting there with an army of marketing people behind you and all the budget in the world, you're never going to be able to do all of this at once. So we need to prioritize, and we need to prioritize partially on audience, because we might know there might be more priority audiences for the business, but also then we'll start to see within those audiences what the priority channels are and where we've got the best opportunity. And the more you understand your current performance as well, you'll see where maybe you're closer to achieving some of these things and where maybe you're further away, and that will help you prioritize as well. So using the think, feel, do model, you can use this to help outline some of your strategy, because the think part is going to tell you what the content needs to convey. So if we know what the customer is thinking, then we know what we need to tell them. Like, if we know what they're asking, we know what our content needs to say. The feel part should drive the storytelling element of the content. So it should drive what it is that we want them to feel, how we're going to tell our story on the page, be it through video, be it through written content, through animation, whatever it is, but it's the storytelling element of it. And the do should give you clarity on what to track, because this is what they're trying to do, what they're likely to do next. But the critical link here is that the do that drives the tracking then needs to be socialized in the business. Because you imagine if you're in a world at the moment where vanity metrics are being used more so, and people just want to know about how much traffic and how many sales did we get. If you're suddenly saying, well, actually, what's really important was this content download over here, you're going to need to take them on a journey to get the business to understand that and to see why that's so important. Because we want everyone to understand that the intention for each stage of the strategy is aligned to what the customer wants. The customer is helping us to see what our strategy should be. And if we don't do this, we can end up with stakeholders having different measures for success. And that can end up as a recipe for disaster, because you end up with people, some people agree and think it's working, some don't get it. They're like, no, I want this number. And if we're all looking in different directions, then we're not going to be driving the strategy forward like we should be. So the important message to convey here is that our audience has defined our success measures. So our audience have told us what success looks like, as well as our money metrics that we already know about. But our audience has told us what we should be measuring. And they've not just told us that, but they've also defined our journey. They've told us what the journey needs to be, because they've told us what it is that they're trying to do and where they're trying to go. And then on top of this, our customers have actually shown us how the channels can be used to support the customer journey and to drive better results. And they've shown us how we can get our channels to work better together, because they've told us the journey that they're going on. And this is really that true customer centricity and this idea of being outside in, because we're not just saying what we think our strategy should be and what we think we should be doing. Instead, our customers have told us what they're trying to do and the way that they think and the journey that they go on to buy something. And we've just taken that information and used it to create our journey. Now, you're always going to need to have your money metrics. We said that at the start. But the money metrics don't tell you how to fix or improve a strategy. So if we all went and looked at our results for July so far, we'll either see that we're ahead of where we should be, we're on track, or we're off track. But that doesn't tell us what do we do about it. That just tells us a fact, which is a fact we need to know. But really, what we need to know is what do we do about it? Whereas if we've got all of these smaller metrics built in and we know that actually it seems that we're going wrong over here, we're not engaging properly at awareness, therefore they're never going to have fallen in love with us in time to buy. They're going to have fallen in love with a different brand that is there. So then we start to see where we can make improvements. So the metrics that matter include everything up until the point of conversion and all of the things that our customers are trying to do. And the metrics that matter are the key moments for the customer in making a decision. So they're the things that are going to be influencing them, the things that are important to them. So the penny drop moment here is that our audience tell us where we should be, what we should say, and how we should track. And suddenly it means that we rely on them to tell us these things. And actually, instead of us having to sit there and have all the best ideas, they're giving us the ideas. And then our job is to work out how do we actually bring that to life, and how do we translate their thoughts into content that's going to resonate with them. So you can then start to define the role for each channel. And this is just an example on screen here. This would be kind of more of a high level view of that really kind of busy persona journey that you're going to have, that's probably got tons of notes and might link off to spreadsheets with data points, etc. But it's almost for each funnel, part of the funnel, we want to make sure that we understand our customer targeting, the channel mix, the KPIs, and what the messaging is. What are we trying to do? And this has all been defined by our customers. I'm going to flick through these ones quite quickly because I'm not going to read them all out, but when you get the slides afterwards, you'll have these. But I've just put some example awareness metrics. So this is just assuming what things might be interesting to your business. But again, I don't know because I'm not in each of your businesses, but things that might be important, that might show that someone's engaging at the awareness stage. And then consideration will tend to be a lot of similar metrics to awareness, but you might find it's on more consideration related pages of your website. So as much as it might be similar metrics, it will be on different portions of your site. So what you then start to see here is that you're kind of bucketing your site off a little bit more. So you're seeing things that happen on these pages will be really early stage, but actually we drive them through the journey to get to these pages, which are much more informative and for when they're starting to get further down the funnel, for example. And then we've got purchase and inquiry metrics, and however that happens in your business, but thinking about how do we actually know that they are engaged and ready to buy and buying from us. And then retention metrics, again, these will vary depending on what you do and how easily you can keep them engaged, but just thinking about what that might look like. So now the great thing, having done all of this research, is that you can now start to bring your colleagues with you on the journey. Because what you don't want to do is just do all of this and keep this in marketing's world and not let the rest of the business know about it. For one thing, the sales team should 100% know about this and start to understand that customer journey better, because it will help them when they're engaging with customers and spotting maybe where the customer is in their journey and thinking about what content they might want to share with them, etc. But also for the wider business, the people that are going to be asking questions around performance, etc. We want to bring them on this journey so that they actually understand all of this. So this isn't just your wacky idea that you've come up with of how to measure digital marketing. We want to show them that actually this has come from our customers, and it's how they're telling us we should measure our strategy, because it's them telling us how we can best engage with them. So this is what your audience want. And plus, the great thing is the business needs are baked in, because we're looking at this as what the customer needs and what the business needs should be aligned with each other. So I'm going to run you through a couple of behavioural nudges to help you get buy-in, because getting buy-in for a strategy is sometimes can be tricky, especially we can sometimes speak a different language to our colleagues. We could be thinking of things in a different way to our colleagues. So getting buy-in is really important. There's also, I have just written a huge article on this, which if anyone's interested, we can share the link, which was more around SEO in particular, but trying to get buy-in, because there's so many different facets, but I've picked out what I think is most important in this journey. So the first thing is we have to remember about availability bias. So as humans, we give undue weight to what easily comes to mind. So if we're used to doing things a certain way and that's all we really know about, we're going to be biased in that way, because that is what's going to be coming to mind. So we need to unlock this information for them. All this research we've done, we need to bring them on this journey and we need to show them it so that actually this is what comes to mind, because they actually understand it. It's there, it's recent in their minds. But we also need to make sure that when we share it in a language that will resonate. That says will be resonate, but will resonate. I'll fix that. But trying to speak in a language that they're going to understand. If we go into too many marketing acronyms, if we're just too much in our own world and not really explaining to them what this really means. And I suppose this is where the customer has given us a great way to do this, because we're speaking in a way of what our customer does throughout the journey. So if you can keep it in that language and keep it from the customer's viewpoint, then it's really easy for them to understand. And we need to make it relevant, make it something that they can see why it's relevant to the business and to the wider strategy of what the business is trying to achieve. So then we've got confirmation bias. So as humans, we analyze and search for information that supports our own ideas and our own understanding. So again, this means that we need to make sure that we've taken them on this journey. But we can also start to think about how we could plan ahead, consider any likely concerns and be ready for them, because I think it's one of the worst things that can happen when you're really sure of doing something is then someone throws a curveball at you and you're not ready for it, and therefore you don't really give it the right response, and maybe it starts to weaken everything that you've just put all of this work into. So actually taking time before you're thinking about presenting this internally to the business to really think about what could they say that they're not sure about? Like, maybe talk to some of your colleagues ahead of time, get any concerns out there so that you can be ready for them in the wider kind of pitch of this. We've then got herding. So people tend to do what others are doing. So if we're presenting to the wider group, we want to try and win over some allies first. It always, if you ever watch any like political dramas, it baffles me, like, but this is obviously what goes on, how much they go in there trying to rally everybody to be behind them. And I guess it makes sense, but if you're not in that world, you don't really think about it. But in the same way, if we know we're about to present something that some people might see as quite controversial, it's different to how we've done things before, if we can get some allies in the room that are supportive and can ask some really great questions that are driven in the right way, then it's going to help you with presenting this. But also, as I said earlier, can you use any competitor insight to support your case? So if we can see that now how we're understanding the customer journey, we've spotted some massive gaps in our own strategy, but that some of our competitors are already here and already doing this, that might spur people on as well to say, wow, we really are missing out. We want to create that FOMO. We want to make them worried about what they're missing out on. Then we've got the opportunity cost neglect. So people tend to ignore what they give up when they make decisions because they've made the decision and it's they're done. They don't want to know. So you want to show them how by looking at the wrong numbers, the business could be missing out. So actually almost maybe what you're doing at the moment and the things that you're missing out on, and how if we don't start to move in this direction and we don't start to really track these deeper metrics to really understand how we're engaging our audience, we're actually really missing out understanding whether we're going to be ready to convert them. And actually, we're not converting as many as we could be. So looking at that and maybe looking at, are there any tests that you can do around this to bring people on the journey? And then decision paralysis, and we've all been here before. When you're given too many options, people often do the easiest option, which is to do nothing. Like, it's really confusing when you're given too many options. So actually, in this case, you need to frame it not as an option. You need to give one clear, well-researched route that you've backed up, that explains how you're going to be measuring the strategy going forward and what this means for the business. So let's wrap up, and we're doing well on time. So the customer journey should underpin your tracking metrics. That is where your tracking metrics are going to come from. As you uncover the customer journey by understanding your audience and researching your channels, these metrics will start to surface because you're going to start to see what's important to them. You're going to start to know what content you've created to specifically help your customers that therefore is really important to the journey. And this insight is showing us, what is important to your customer. And you have to remember that what's important to your customer should be important to you, because that is going to be how you're more likely to convert them. So the metrics that matter are the dials to unleash your performance. So remember, as I said earlier, if those big numbers don't tell us what to fix, the metrics that matter do tell us what to fix. They show us where we're down on something, that actually, if we can try to find a way to turn that up or reach more of this audience in this particular way, that's going to help us unleash our performance. And to do this well, you need the business to be bought into chasing the metrics that matter. Like, everyone needs to get this, because otherwise you're going to keep getting pulled back towards those vanity metrics. So hopefully you will have found that interesting. We're going to send you the slides rather than there being a QR code on here, but we will send you the slides afterwards. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all your lovely faces. And hopefully you found that useful, and it would be brilliant to just see if anyone's got any questions.
Hi, Becky. I've got a question around personas. How many personas should or could you be looking at? And how do you prioritize which of those personas are most important? Because that will obviously determine perhaps how you split your spend.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a problem that we had at EcoEgg, where we started off with a small number of personas and then we ended up with 7. And we were like, how do we prioritize between these 7 personas? There's too many.
No, I get that. And sometimes it is really difficult. So I guess the number of personas really, like, I'm going to caveat most of what I'm going to say is it really depends on each business. But I don't know, typically we tend to see clients with between 3 and 5 personas, but we try and help clients work them out into their primary and their secondary. So which ones are driving most of the business. And I guess there's a job you can do looking back to see, based on these personas that you've worked out, how many current customers and sales fit into each of these buckets. And you could say that the one that you have most sales in is probably a priority persona. But then looking forward, you might say, well, actually, we see a risk to that audience, or we're not sure that going forward, that's going to be our biggest audience. Therefore, actually, we might see a different audience to be a bigger opportunity. So a bit has to be done there of taking some can be a bit data led, but also can be a bit on gut feel of where we think the business is going and starting to test things out. And the priority should come from a channel perspective and where you should be spending your money on where you see the size of the opportunity. So based on all the data, because you then have these data points to back it all up, because what you will find is that as much as the personas are slightly different, some of their actions will be exactly the same. So you might see that they all start in it or ask similar questions at awareness. Therefore, actually, we can be killing multiple birds with one stone, as it were, by taking a few audiences at once and really working on organically ranking for some certain phrases, for example. So yeah, it is a bit of it depends. And yeah, 7 is really difficult if you're trying to service them all in the same way. So you do have to prioritize. And sometimes that might need to be a bit of a gut feel at some point to go, look, we're going to commit, and this is where we see our opportunity right now. And as we've got more time, resource, and money, we might be able to do more, but let's focus here for now. Does that help? Cool. Any other questions? You can pop them in the chat or come off mute, whatever you prefer. No? That's cool. If we haven't got any other questions, that's not a problem. I did say I'd try and give us some time back in our day. But if anyone does want to come back with any questions afterwards, you'll have my contact details. I think Erin's going to be doing quite a lot of our follow-ups. So she'll be sending you out links to watch this back, links to the slides. So you'll have all of our contact details. So if there's anything you need, or if you want to have a little session kind of talking about what you're measuring at the moment and how we might change that, or how we'd apply this process to where you are in your business, then by all means, we'd love to chat about that. We always love to get feedback. I said at the start, we'd love some feedback. So Chantel has just kindly popped our link in there for our feedback. So what I'll do, I'm going to stick some lovely lift music on. This is how we always end our sessions, if you've not been before. I'm going to stick some music on in a second, and just feel free to, if you've got 2 minutes now, because we still have time in your diaries, to fill in the feedback form. We'd really, really appreciate it, because it just helps us make sure that these sessions are as useful as possible. And then as you're ready, you can drop off and go and enjoy your Wednesday. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you so much to Erin and Chantel for all your support in putting today on, and thank you for spending your Wednesday morning with us.